Hi, welcome to my podcast. This is Making Peace with Emotions. I'm Marshall Bolin. This is the podcast where I talk about insights that I learned being a client of my former therapist, whose name was Amr Barrada. He was an author, and he lived in Edina, Minnesota, which is the town that I grew up in. And I learned some important things from him, such as how to slow down. I like to start these podcast episodes with some slow guitar music that I feel puts me in the similar sort of frame of mind that was helpful to get into when I was recovering from emotional problems for the first time, and still am. It's an ongoing process. There's not such a thing as a state of pure mental illness or a state of pure mental health. What there is a way of life where you get better and better. And there's peaks and valleys. And it's human, it's natural, and it's imperfect. Just like this podcast is imperfect. I could make it so that, there's no background noise. I have the equipment to do that. But such a high standard is hard to live up to, and I don't find myself deciding to make a podcast episode very often. So I thought, okay, why don't I just set up the computer and record some insights that I learned from Amr, and it's okay if there's noise in the background. Maybe somebody watches this podcast or listens to it and says, oh man, what an amateur, and they don't take me seriously. Well, that's okay. I can tolerate that. Amr's book, the one that I was reading chapters from in the first season of this podcast, it's called Making Peace with Anxiety and Depression. The book itself was self-published, and I think you call this justified. It's not justified, the text. It just kind of, it doesn't perfectly go to the edge of the page. And he was a brilliant guy. He could have spent a lot of time, making this book look like other books. But he didn't bother. And I really like that. I don't know if that was intentional with the spirit of the book, learning to be imperfect and just, take meaningful steps, incremental doable steps towards what you want, and not try to live up to this standard of perfection that maybe it doesn't really even matter in the end. So that's the approach I'm going to take to this next season of Making Peace with Emotions. I'm going to talk to you like a person as opposed to reading something that I wrote on page and worked really hard over for a long time. It's going to be more improvised and conversational. And hopefully, over time, it will get better. So yeah, I like to start the episodes with this guitar music that is slow. And I wanted to talk about just how important being slow is in the process of recovering from emotional problems and in just accomplishing anything that we want to accomplish that's meaningful in our lives. So I learned this from Amr Barrada, my therapist, and he said that what he used to do was, in the days when everybody wore watches, he would ask his clients to take off their watch, and he would time them doing that. And then after they'd done that the first time, he would say, okay, do that again. Take off your watch again. And I'm going to time you a second time, but this time, do it as fast as you can. And so he would time them. And it turned out that every time, they were actually faster the first time when they weren't trying to go fast. And they were slower the second time when they were trying to go fast. They'd fumble and make mistakes, and there wasn't just this direct, natural fluidity of doing the thing. There was this added layer of I'm trying to do fast, and I'm evaluating my fastness while I'm doing it. And man, that really resonated with me. And I think about that a lot when I'm going to do something that's important and maybe I'm anxious about doing it. I speak in front of audiences, and I like to slow down mentally before I speak. And that helps me to communicate better the way that I want to communicate without, a lot of franticness and avoidable mistakes. It's an irony. There are so many ironies involved in effectively recovering from emotional problems. And this is one of them. The faster you go, the slower you get there. So there's a difference between slowing down and calming down. When somebody tells me to calm down, I don't feel more calm. I feel more angry. What it seems like to me is that they're not making space for me to have my natural emotions about the situation. Maybe I feel anxious. Maybe I feel nervous. Maybe I feel angry. And it's not possible to tell myself to feel differently. And this is something really poignant that I learned from Amr that, as far as I can tell, is not a mainstream idea. And I think it should be. That we can feel however we're going to feel, and that's okay. And it's not actually possible to say to myself, hey, feel a different way, and then feel different. In fact, the way that emotional problems work is that we get caught in these cycles where we try really hard to feel differently, and we can't because that's not possible. Emotions don't work that way. And then we feel even worse because we think of ourselves as failures. And we think, oh, anybody should be able to do this. What's wrong with me? I'm mentally ill. I should be able to force myself to think different thoughts or feel different feelings. And it doesn't work that way. So I can't calm down. I can't say calm down and then feel more calm. But what I can do is intentionally slow down internally. And do that by whatever means is natural to me. Maybe it means sitting in silence for a few minutes before I begin. But actually what I do is I just think about that analogy of the watches. So people with emotional problems are very accelerated mentally. We're trying to do a lot of things perfectly. We're trying to take everything into account, and we're trying to make sure that we avoid suffering 100%. And that's not what human beings, that's not what a human life is. And human beings are not capable of entirely avoiding suffering. It's good to avoid suffering as much as we can, but it's helpful to know that there is no such thing as a perfect solution to any problem. And it's not my responsibility to change the fact that life entails suffering. In other words, there are so many situations in a normal, healthy human life that are dilemmas, where I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't. So please reach out if you are interested in hearing me talk about any particular subject related to recovering from emotional problems. I'd like to hear what you're thinking of this podcast and what you would like to hear more of. Maybe you'd want to be a guest on the podcast. I don't know. Reach out to me. You can email me at askmarshallb@gmail.com. That's that's AskMarshallB@gmail. And if you're interested in becoming a coaching client of mine, you can learn more about what I do and what the coaching's all about on my website. That's www.marshallbolin.com. That's MarshallBolin. And if you're watching the video version of this podcast, I'll put the links in the text below. Okay? Until next time, have a good one.